game's over.
Welcome into Triple Zeros. I'm your host, Josh Buckhalter. Follow me on Twitter at JoshyBuck. Hit up the Facebook page at Clocker Sports. Website, clockersports.com, and the email address is clockersports@gmail.com. A lot to talk about today, man. Still in the middle of this COVID-19 has still got everything shut down pretty much in the sports world. But conversations about ramping things up have heated up, even though it doesn't really seem like stuff is going anywhere. One beneficiary of that, at least maybe the only beneficiary of that, has been the NFL because of where they are situated in all of this. But before we get talking about that, I got to talk about the NBA. And the biggest story coming out of the NBA today has been about Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets and his outspokenness over the return to play scenario that has been put in place about the bubble going to Orlando and all that. Now, first and foremost, it's important to understand what Kyrie said and what's being put out there. The most prominent bite from him has been him saying that he wasn't with all the BS, all the racism and the bullshit. Right? He said that he wasn't for return to play. He wasn't going to Orlando. He wasn't with going to Orlando because of all the racism and injustice going on. He said that he was willing to give it all up. And that's what the story that's been run. Full stop. That's all you've been seeing most everywhere in the social media spheres. Now, the problem with that is that's not all that he said, but because that's all that's been put out there, you have stars, mid-level players, retired players, analysts, all taking shots at Kyrie. And I wrote about it for Clocker Sports that Kyrie's kind of like the broken clock, right? I believe it's Marie Von Ebner, said that even a stop clock is right twice a day. Kyrie is a stop clock, right? We saw what he did with Boston. You saw what happened in Cleveland. So sure, people want to sit there and immediately assume that he's just out here wilding out and saying anything because he wants to get the attention. But what they're failing to realize is, again, that broken clock can still be right. And that's what seems to be happening here. Kyrie isn't necessarily a guy that you want leading your team. But in moments like this where we see what happens, groupthink can take over. You can see a lot of the players and kind of came out later is that some of the guys weren't necessarily willing to be so outspoken. Now, as I wrote in the article, it's important to also remember that Kyrie was elected to be the vice president of the Players Association. So while we like to think that he was just tossing out these random ideas, and I know that he was questioning whether or not he can get spot treatments and things like that, like just a little extra superfluous things about the freedoms that they would have when in the bubble. And so people want to kind of revert back to that, but these are very valid concerns. He was talking about not wanting to be a distraction, but see, everybody was attacking him on simply saying that he didn't want the game to come back. And that's not what he was saying. What he was saying was, or that you couldn't do both play and have social justice. What he was saying was he didn't want there to be a distraction. Now, one person who picked up on that was Dwight Howard. Of course, Dwight Howard himself has been rather mercurial. That's a word that popped up a couple of times in the article, just because it fits both of these guys so well. But so it's not like he has like the most outstanding of allies in the situation. Now, he also had Avery Bradley who spoke out about it. You had guys speaking out for a bunch of different reasons, and that's what was also interesting about it, is that you had guys questioning for other reasons other than this, and those weren't seeming to be nearly questioned as much. You had injury concerns with Donovan Mitchell, which were very valid, and you see him now pushing for players, he and Jason Tatum pushing for players to get insurance. You also saw like I said, analysts and Stephen A. Smith and Kendrick Perkins, former player Kendrick Perkins, who went so far as to say that Kyrie has a popular voice, but he's not a powerful voice, which is interesting because, like I just said, later on, Adrian Wojnarowski would come out and say on ESPN that Kyrie was speaking for a lot of players, a lot of guys who didn't want to be so outspoken. So it was kind of interesting, and I kind of alluded to how many angles he was getting attacked and how really they were all wrong because he wasn't even saying they won't play. Again, the big important part was that they cut off the rest of him saying that if they all wanted to play, then let's go do it. And also, because Austin Rivers kind of laid into him about the money thing. Ed Davis came out later on in the evening and did the same thing, talking about how a lot of guys haven't been paid like Kyrie. But he literally acknowledged that in that same sit-down or whatever those excerpts were from Shams Charania and Chris Haynes. They were everywhere. So, like, it's funny that people only picked up on that one bite. But he said, it's a tiered system, and Chris Haynes kind of pushed back on him, saying that the way the NBA structure is set, it kind of keeps a cap on the big guys so that the disparity doesn't grow even further. But I think what Kyrie is saying is you still have guys who have and have nots, no matter even if the have not is more than a regular, common person's salary, because Haynes pointed that out as well. You still are seeing, kind of younger guys maybe not wanting to speak as much, and then guys who are on the verge of getting their next contract not wanting to speak out as well and ruffle the feathers, because we know that there's been a consortium at the top, the LeBron Jameses, the Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonards, Chris Pauls, those guys want to continue. So as I put in the article, and please go check that out, clockersports.com, it's not necessarily as cut and dry as, Kyrie is the guy who's been breaking up teams, so clearly he's just out here trying to ruffle feathers, as Kendrick Perkins tried to put on him. I totally disagreed, and come to find out, I was right, because I said in the article, he's probably speaking for a lot more people than we like to realize, because a lot of those voices have gotten drowned out in this just because that's the nature of the beast. So, he got aired out, Kyrie did, for saying what he said. He didn't deserve it then, and he definitely doesn't deserve it now. Like I said, he's apparently speaking for many, so, I mean, if anything, you got to acknowledge that Kyrie is officially serving up the Crow special, because, you just don't see it happen too often where a guy like him, again, classic broken clock thing, right? Where it's right twice a day. And this one happens to be where he was right now. The other one could be, we'll leave that alone for now. We're not going to go in there right now. But in this situation, I think that people were kind of attacking him. And they ran with Austin Rivers' comments too. And he kind of did like I said, the whole guys need to provide for their family and this, that, and the third. And I think it's important to remember that he is a coach's son. But also that everything that he was saying, Kyrie said. So I'm not sure, again, why everybody was so quick to jump on Kyrie, but didn't necessarily think didn't think to look up exactly what he was saying, because he was just expressing very valid concerns in the middle of a lot of uncertainty. Again, the host city that they're planning on going to, Florida, or host state is having an influx of cases of COVID-19 and actually had to shut down the bars again as those have exploded. So, I'm not sure that everybody took the chance to actually take in what he was saying, rather than they were just reacting to the person saying it. It was the messenger in the situation that kind of got the better of everybody. So I'm not gonna completely fault everyone for jumping on him, but I think maybe he definitely deserves at least an apology for a couple of guys who won't happen, but he definitely deserves one, because man, I mean, players just lighting them up like Kyrie was out here speaking crazy. Now, I wonder how much of that was public show, right? Because of the whole, you don't want to be one of the guys who was saying that you don't want to play. It's a very, very tricky situation, but this one was definitely a situation where they tried to put Kyrie in a spot that he just wasn't even in. That was what was wild to me about the people who were pushing it, just not even trying to put out the part where he said, well, let's go play. And he acknowledged that most of the guys haven't gotten paid. He says only like 20 of us has gotten paid. So, again, there's a narrative being pushed that it's really odd, because it's not real. But also, it's extremely inaccurate, just because Kyrie has kind of been what you would expect somebody in this position to be. So, that's all I had to say about that one. Now, coming a little bit more local, the Chicago Bulls. I told you about last episode kind of how the front office is evaluating the roster. There's still no word on head coach Jim Boylan yet, but it got me to thinking about the roster composition and what could possibly be shaken up. Now, you have the front court of Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter. It's been very underwhelming in my opinion, and the reason I say that is because the two of them just can't seem to either stay on the floor together, and when they are, I'm just not sure the production and even the fit is really what it's supposed to be at this point. So, what bothers me the most about this is, now, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Arturas Karnisovas, the Bulls vice president of basketball operations, came out and said that he has a plan for Lauri to have a bounce back. Mark Eversley said that he's going to look into the reasons why Lauri was failing, kind of hinting that he might think that it was a more of a coaching thing than a talent issue. We've been talking about how Lowry had spoken out saying that he was ready for a change of scenery if things didn't change. Well, he's gotten his change now. We'll see what they do with the head coach. But I would have to imagine that if you're cleaning this much house, you're not keeping Jim Boylan around. I'm sorry. I mean, that's what all indications are, that they're going to be moving away from Boylan. Now, the problem is, though, Carter just hasn't really asserted himself enough to be considered untouchable. I'm not sure that his skill set lends itself well enough to what Markkanen brings down. He's a very good defender, but he doesn't really protect the rim, and you miss that. Now, is that because he's been having to blitz ball screens in Jim Boylan's defense, or is that really going to be an issue? Because, again, he's still undersized. Even though he's probably about a common center for today, he's still undersized, and a lot of there are some traditional ones out there. Indiana's got 2 of them, and if they get on him, they're going to wear him out. We've seen it a lot of times. He gets outworked, outbodied just because he's not the biggest guy. He's not the most athletic guy either. So I wonder if long term this fit's going to work. Now, he has come out and said that he wants to play power forward. It's funny because Al Horford, who he's been compared to throughout his entire career before even getting to the league, is a guy who said the same thing. He doesn't want to be a center. He wants to be a power forward, much like Anthony Davis out with the Los Angeles Lakers. But the difference with Horford and Davis is the ability to shoot the outside shot, the three-point ball. And Carter was never known for shooting. He can shoot them, right? He shot 41% in college, but he only shot about 2 a game, something like that. I don't think it's even 2 a game. I think it was less than that, but it might have been 2 a game. But now he's gotten to the league and he's shooting under 20%. So you wonder, is that because he's not getting the volume? Is it the distance is just messing with him? Is it the pressure? Who knows what it could be? But he talks about wanting to play forward, and I just think that if you're going to do that, then I need you to be able to shoot a lot better, more consistently from the outside. Now, again, who knows how much of this is going to be on the scheme of things and how they had him operating. But if he's able to turn it around, then there's a whole nother level that this front court can take. Now, you again have to pair that defensive prowess that he brings is so important, because Markkanen brings none. So I think that when you think about the fact that Carter hasn't been the rim protector, right? He keeps guys from getting there, but it's not intimidation. It's not he's not sending too many shots away, and again, he can still be outworked and outmuscled. So moving to the floor, is he shooting a 3-ball well enough? Is his free throw shooting good enough to kind of offset whatever deficiencies that you have at the 3-point line, to where he shoots just enough to make the defense honest, and then he tries to drive to the lane and get a foul? There's so many different aspects of this that you kind of have to wonder about. It's really unknown. Now, the thing with Markkanen, I've been a harsh Markkanen critic, but we've seen it from him, right? You know that he's capable of it. So it's not necessarily an issue of trying to figure out whether or not he can do it. It's how you get it out of him consistently. For Carter, it's whether or not he can do it at this level. And I don't think that's hard to I don't think that's out of the realm of questions for him, right? That's something that he kind of needs to prove still. And he's like I said, been very vocal about wanting to be back at the 4. But in today's NBA, he's not athletic enough to cover the wings that are going to be playing at that spot in clutch time. And he doesn't shoot it well enough to keep those kind of guys honest and not a problem for him defensively. So I just don't know exactly what this ultimately means for him. Again, they spoke out and said how much they want to see Lowry get better. And I've always felt like Carter has been the most consistent Bull, but he's also a guy who's better off being described as jack of all trades, master of none. I just don't see too many situations where he's going to be a guy who's going to win the game for you. He might be able, he's a glue guy. He's a really good glue guy, but ultimately, I'm not sure that he gives you what you need for the 5 full time. And I'm not sure that the way the Bulls are set up, especially, that he's going to be good enough to play the 4 for this team. Now, does that mean that you trade him? Does that mean do you trade Markkanen? What do you do with those 2 guys? I'm not sure that you move either one of them. I'm not sure that you can. You probably have to ride it out this year and see if you can get some more rim protection out of Carter. But at times, rookie Daniel Gafford has looked better as a rim protecting 5 than Carter has. That's going to be an issue. Now, and I don't mean that necessarily as a bad thing. I just mean it's going to be something they have to address. Now, I would expect that you would see him gone before you see Markkanen gone, just because I think that the talent level is the ceiling for Markkanen is higher, the offensive ability in an offensive league is higher. You definitely lose a lot of defense, but I will say this: one thing that's been disappointing to me is how the rebounding hasn't gone the Bulls' favor with those two on the floor. While Markkanen is a finesse player, he's still 7 feet tall, and I've always lamented that he doesn't get enough boards. Carter, while not athletic, is a tactician and knows his ankles and uses his body well. So I've been surprised and disappointed when they don't get better rebound totals. Now, again, Carter is a solid double guy at his best, but consistency is just not there, and that's probably part of health, or a lot of factors really. But together, they just aren't a group that is putting numbers up that make me feel like they have to stay together. I'm not seeing that. So if the Bulls, and maybe we'll explore that a little bit further, but in the article that's probably going to come out for Pippen Ain't Easy tomorrow, I do talk about the numbers in Carter and how I just wonder out loud, where does this leave him? The management's behind Markkanen. We know Kobe White's the young guy. The Zach LaVine is kind of a guy in limbo too, but the big question about the core players that the Bulls have drafted, the organization has drafted, Wendell Carter has to be one that's sitting there now as a major question mark because of what he wants to do and who knows what the future is for the team. Maybe the next guy can keep him at the 5 and they can make it all work, but I just feel like their Bulls need some rim protection that they don't get from him, even though you do get some good defense otherwise. So that's something to keep an eye on. And again, we'll go into the what to do's with him in a future episode, but that putting the ponderance out there, putting it out in the ether. What is it that you do with Wendell Carter? What does this leave him now with everything going? The changes coming around and front office seemingly committed to Lauri Markkanen. Kobe White's going to be there. Zach LaVine still taking a bunch of the shots. Wendell wants to play the 4. I just don't see that working with the Bulls. I don't see it working, but I definitely don't see it working with the Bulls. So who knows what happens to him ultimately. Hopefully it works out for the best. Going to take a quick break and come back, switch gears, talk about the NFL. And, man, one of my former Bears laid into the beloved. This hurt. Be right back. 000. Back now on 000, and before we get to the talk about the former Bears player that just let my team have it, gotta tell you, so we're all anxious for sports to get back, and I was talking about earlier how the NFL's kind of in the best spot of all of these teams because they're the last one that has to start, and they kind of get to wait and see how everybody else attempts to make their comeback while they gather the information. Well, the comebacks for everybody else haven't been going so smoothly, so I'm getting less and less confident in a return to the NFL on time. But more importantly than that, we're now seeing new developments of cases of COVID-19 breaking out. Reportedly, from Adam Schefter, members of the Dallas Cowboys, including Ezekiel Elliott and Houston Texans, are tested positive for COVID-19. Now, this is not related to the party that was famous for Dak Prescott a couple of weeks ago, where Zeke Elliott was there and a few other people, where it was a big deal because they weren't doing social distancing and all that and the third, and Dak came out and said they were, blah blah blah. Not the point. Point was they weren't there. That's not the reason why they got the COVID now. But what this does mean that it's in Texas. We know that already. But good luck keeping it under wraps until then. You're gonna again. Football's lucky that they have a little bit of time left before they have to actually get started. But good luck allaying anybody's concerns. I just told you, we just talked about how the NBA is kind of going through all this turmoil about whether or not to return. There's a major push from the top. There's a stagnation from the actual labor. And they're like, yeah, I don't know about all of that. Baseball sent out, and we don't even talk baseball on this show, but I'm trying to tell you how massively impactful this has been. Baseball is negotiating a very public manner between the players and the owners and trying to get a situation going. But Commissioner Rob Manfred came out today and said that he's not 100% positive that there will be a baseball season. This is only a week or so after he came out and said that he expects there to be 100%, expects there to be a baseball season. Now it's switched now, and it's understandable because of the complications of trying to make everything work out. But the MLBPA sent out a memo saying to just lay out your games and we'll play. Why is that significant for everybody else? Well, because the NBA tried to pull the same thing and kind of force feed it through with the guys at the top approving everything, and here comes Kyrie. Now, it's even more important when you realize, boom, he then becomes the media fallout guy. Why is it important to the NFL? Because the NFL is sitting back watching all of this. They watch the NHL come out with the dynamic playoff format, right? You saw the NBA try to be even more dynamic with how they return to the season and get everything going back, and how to increase revenue for teams that weren't about to give teams that were on the cusp of making the playoffs, or a chance to actually make a run. Try to make it interesting for everybody. And then you got the NFL, or then you got the MLB, excuse me, who really are slow playing everything and doing things all out in the open and not gaining many fans on the MLB side while being called out by the players. Trevor Bauer went in on Rob Manfred. I mean, the thread about how the logic of, taking them from 70 games down to 50 because they wanted to get the money but not want to pay out the players' salaries. And you're just seeing a lot of shenanigans going on. And I'm just telling you, with the outbreaks, the contentious negotiations, and then NBA could have contentious negotiations next year. The NFL could play it cautious, and we could see a very truncated season if we see a season at all, and that's what worries me. Because the impact of these other leagues not going off so well, now that could allow the NFL to formulate a plan that works 10 times better. That's very true. But what we've seen so far is everybody that's been able to see somebody before them has found a new way to F it up, and that's not working out for anybody. So that's what my concern would be, again, with these outbreaks, positive tests with the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans. That's just something to keep an eye on. Again, man, I'm very hopeful that the season will come back, and I actually just wrote a piece for Last Word on Pro Football, and I'll be writing one about this Kyle Long story too, how it's really not that big of a deal that he said that. He said that on the thread, he said that he was told at halftime that he just basically let them know that he wasn't the same player that he used to be. If you follow the Bears at all, Kyle Fuller has been an injured player for a few years now, and when he's healthy, he's one of the better guards in the league, but he hadn't been healthy. So I don't fault the Bears for necessarily wanting to move on, but I do kind of want to know that story about, damn, man, like, how did you tell him at halftime? Like, how did y'all not know? Now, again, I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, that might have been the mercy pull where a lot of the fan base was actually happy because, again, Long had been injured and wasn't looking like himself. So he retired, but rumors are now surfacing that he could pop up in another city. Maybe he goes to Philly, where they just lost Brandon Brooks to a torn ACL for the season. And he said that if he were to return, it would be for a different organization. He says that he's done a lot publicly to support them, but he wouldn't play for them again, and that's understandable. Why would you come back? But I do find it interesting that he chose to air him out about how they told him at halftime of that Raiders game, that faithful Raiders game that kind of feels like the turning point for the season. You know what? Now that I think about it, boom, that's what it was. See, they messed up the mojo of the whole season, telling Kyle Long at halftime basically that he was done. That's how you cook your goose, right there. Damn. I'm going to tweet that one now, because it just struck me that that's when it happened. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense because the season was never the same after that. So, yeah, it's rough to read because he's one of the beloved players, but also, he says they rightfully released him, and that's not to say that he's taking the high road here. It's just the truth. But again, I think you'd be hard pressed to find too many fans who follow them regularly who would say that they made a bad decision. Now, you might say that they should have tried to work to bring him back at some form, but it sounds to me like he was ready to move on anyway. And then again, when it happened, he retired. They didn't, as far as I know, they didn't like handwrite his retirement speech or anything like that. His email or his post, excuse me. But he does say that he will find out if he's still ready to play or not. And I mean, I wish him all the luck. I just, man, seeing that on the Twitter timeline was interesting in the midst of COVID-19 and all types of other wild stuff today. Just a random Kyle Long airing out Matt Nagy and them. That was something else to see. The other very, very interesting piece here now is that what does that do for this coaching staff going forward? You have to kind of wonder if they're going to be able to maintain, if they're losing anybody else, right? Because Kyle Long has to be one of the better locker room guys. Again, he was a good teammate, one of the fan favorites. When he was healthy, he was one of the top level players in the league. So does this ultimately hurt the team the organization with their credibility. Obviously, if they win games, then nobody's going to care. But I think that it is a weird feeling to. I take that back because they've known this for a while, probably. So this is probably not an issue for them at all. Now that I think about it, but it definitely is one to keep an eye on going forward, and it kind of lends itself to some of the stuff that you might think from the outside looking in with Matt Nagy and how it's going on with communication between the fans, with general manager Ryan Pace saying one thing and then doing another, and it's almost proven to be Ryan Pace. It's opposite. Whatever he says, believe the opposite, because that's what he's proven to do time and time again so far. So that's always been something that I found fascinating with him. But this Kyle Long thing kind of just it took me back because, again, when he first retired, it made so much sense. It seemed like it was very mutual and that he was ready. It didn't seem like they forced him. And now to hear it this way, that they kind of told him what it was going to be at halftime of the Raiders. Was that like week 5, week 6, something like that? It was early. And then he played out the rest of the season. And just knew that it was going to be the end of the run. That has to have some kind of a negative impact on the locker room, right? There's no way that this just didn't affect anybody else but him. So, I guess my question is, if you're a guy, say you're Akeem Hicks, you are dominant when you're in the game. You were hurt last year. Let's say you get hurt again. Are you not worried about that? I mean, it's the not for long league. We already know about all of that. But like, I don't know. I just feel like this one was kind of a one, especially with the weakness that the Bears have at the position. I feel like they kind of put the cart before the horse here, and they could have done themselves a huge favor by trying to work out a deal with him prior to releasing him, right? Say they tried to just rework the contract or something like that, but the goose was already cooked when they told him at halftime that he was done. It's a tough situation, again, because I can't necessarily disagree. That's the worst part about it. I don't necessarily think that they were wrong to tell him that or to insinuate that to him, but it does kind of suck because, that has to, like I said, leave a cloud over the rest of the team. Just keep an eye on that going forward because, man, I'm telling you, things like that don't necessarily go away. That's how the Bulls ended up ultimately getting the bad reputation that they have. So Chicago teams got to do better than allowing funky things to happen between management, personnel, coaches, and all that kind of stuff. Because in the end, you just look like a bush league team, and this is the second seed. Man, you can't be operating like a minor league organization. That's just not going to fly. Last bit of news that I did find rather interesting. Cam Newton was on video working out with OBJ, and a lot of speculation started flying out because, as you know, Cam Newton is still a free agent, and, well, the Browns have Baker Mayfield. And while there's a lot of people who are supportive of Baker Mayfield, former first overall pick, Oklahoma Sooner, there are a lot of people who will tell you that Baker Mayfield ain't all that. So to see those two working out, it was kind of one of those things. Cam is, first of all, timeout. Cam Newton is my favorite NFL player actively playing in the NFL right now, today. All right, time in. Now, you see this video, and of course the speculation starts to go just wild. Oh my goodness, are the Browns going to sign Cam? Is OBJ trying to get the Browns to sign Cam and all these other things? And I thought to myself, or these are two top level athletes. And I mean, I'm not just saying that because they're football players. I'm talking about in the group of football players, these two guys would stand out in terms of athletic ability. They're staying in shape now. Would it be a good fit? Hell yeah. Because Cam needs a job, and it doesn't sound like the Browns organization. It sounds like the Browns organization is becoming less and less certain about Baker Mayfield by the day, which is interesting because the hype and love around him was so high. For it to come down to this point now, I think is more than telling. I think it's kind of sad because, like, damn, you're still the Cleveland Browns. You can't act like it's all on him. Let's not pretend like, there's not some kind of wild curse over this organization right now. That's the one thing. But the other thing is, you haven't made any moves to. If you change quarterbacks now, you're going into a rebuild. So I don't think going to Cam, despite what they think about the rest of that supporting cast, they got some talent. It doesn't seem to be put together properly. Again, maybe it is Cam. Maybe it is the difference of the quarterback. Because I talk about what the Bears could do if they were to have capable play under center, and so I can't completely dismiss that for the Cleveland Browns. But I do think that a better fit for Cam Newton would be Pittsburgh, a team with Ben Roethlisberger who's dealt with injuries in the past, coming off of a season-ending elbow injury last year, has flirted with retirement before. The team is looking like they could be in transition. This could be a perfect time for him to be a bridge quarterback next year for a young guy. Because they didn't take one this year, so that leads me to believe that they feel like they could do something. Again, if they don't though, and they've kind of let it be known they're not going to be re-signing Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner as well. Smith-Schuster is an interesting one because I'm gonna have to probably dig into that one too, because he did a lot of I don't want to call it caping, but he definitely did a lot of lip service for the organization in the Antonio Brown saga, just to have it aired out very early that they wouldn't be bringing him back. That's an interesting plot twist. It's something that I will probably be documenting later on one of the many websites. That's going to do it for this episode of Triple Zeros. Follow me on Twitter at Josh G. Buck. Hit up the Facebook page, Clocker Sports website, clockersports.com. The email address is clockersports@gmail.com. Check out the right man, clockersports.com. Pippin ain't easy. Last word on pro football. And until the very next time, you already know what it is, man. I'm out.